The peaceful world of New Eden was about to become a graveyard. The sky above the Villani colony burned red as massive alien warships hung in the darkness like metal vultures waiting to feast. These weren't just any invaders, they were the Korthok Empire, reptilian monsters who had turned conquest into an art form. General Vexstar stood on the bridge of his flagship, his yellow eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. His scales rippled with anticipation as he gazed down at the helpless world below. 24 hours he hissed into the communication array, his forked tongue tasting the fear that would soon fill the air. Surrender completely, or we turn your pretty little world into ash and bone. The Korthok Empire didn't just want to conquer, they wanted to harvest. New Eden sat on the largest deposit of quantum crystals in known space, crystals that could power their war machine for centuries. But they also wanted something else: slaves. The Villani people were known for their intelligence and gentle nature, which made them perfect for the Empire's labor camps. Down on the surface, Colony Administrator Hannah felt her heart sink as she received the ultimatum. She was a young woman, barely 30, who had been elected to lead because of her quick thinking and fierce dedication to her people. Now she faced an impossible choice: surrender and watch her people become slaves, or fight and watch them die. Distress signals to every allied world, she ordered, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. Emergency frequency, maximum power. Tell them we need immediate assistance. But the responses that came back were all the same. The Terran Federation was 3 weeks away at maximum speed. Andromedans were dealing with their own crisis. The peaceful trade worlds had no military to send. Even worse, when Hannah contacted the Galactic Council, their response was cold and bureaucratic. Resource disputes between sovereign entities are considered internal matters, came the official reply. The Council cannot intervene in territorial conflicts without unanimous consent from all member species. Hannah wanted to scream. Internal matters? The Korthok Empire was about to commit genocide. The galaxy's supposed peacekeepers were hiding behind paperwork. As the first bombardment began, the outer settlements erupted in pillars of fire. Plasma cannons from the Korthok ships carved through buildings like they were made of paper. Families ran screaming through the streets as their homes collapsed around them. The beautiful crystal gardens that had made New Eden famous were turned into fields of molten glass. In the underground shelters, Elder Minho held his granddaughter Yuna close to his chest. At 73, he had lived through the colony's founding, watched it grow from a small mining outpost into a thriving world of 2 million souls. His weathered hands, scarred from decades of crystal mining, shook as he stroked Yuna's dark hair. "Grandfather, why is the sky angry?" 6-year-old Yuna whispered, her large brown eyes wide with confusion. Through the shelter's reinforced viewport, they could see the crimson glow of burning settlements painting the clouds in shades of blood. Minho's throat tightened. How do you explain evil to a child? How do you tell someone so innocent that there are beings in the universe who enjoy causing pain? "The sky is an angry little star," he said softly, using his pet name for her. "Bad people are making it look that way, but good people are trying to stop them." But even as he said the words, Minho knew they might be lies. Where were the good people? Where were the heroes from the stories he used to tell Yuna? In the colony's command center, Communications Officer Day was frantically trying to coordinate the evacuation when something strange appeared on his sensors. "Administrator Hannah," he called out, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm getting weird." "Readings on long-range scan," Hannah rushed over, her heart jumping with hope. "Reinforcements? I don't know." Day's fingers danced across his console, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "There's something out there, but it's tiny. Way too small to be a warship, and it keeps..." He paused, frowning at the display. "It keeps what?" Hannah demanded, disappearing. "Every time I try to get a lock on it, it vanishes from the sensors. Like it's not really there." Day shook his head. "It's probably just interference from the Korthok jamming systems." But deep down, he wasn't so sure. There was something deliberate about the way the contact appeared and disappeared. Almost like something was watching them, studying the situation, waiting for the right moment to act. Meanwhile, in the shelters, word was spreading that they were truly alone. The miners and farmers who had built this world with their bare hands were now preparing to defend it with mining lasers and construction tools. They had no military training, no real weapons, but they had something the Korthok didn't expect. They had nothing left to lose. Young mother. Sujin clutched her baby boy to her chest as she helped distribute the few real weapons they had. "We're going to die here, aren't we?" she whispered to her husband, Dong-Wook. He couldn't meet her eyes. Dong-Wook had been a construction foreman before this nightmare began. He knew how to build things, not destroy them. But tomorrow, he would have to pick up a plasma cutter and pretend it was a weapon of war. "Maybe," he said quietly.
"I will make them remember us."
As the night wore on, the mysterious sensor contact continued to appear and vanish like a ghost in the darkness. Each time it showed up, it seemed a little closer, as if something was slowly, carefully approaching the battle zone. On his flagship, General Vexstar was growing impatient. "Status report," he growled to his tactical officer. "Outer settlements have been neutralized. Civilian casualties estimated at 40,000. Resistance is minimal, mostly mining equipment being used as weapons." Vexstar's lipless mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Pathetic. These soft creatures think their little tools can stop the might of the Empire. Begin the final assault at dawn. I want this world conquered before the next cycle. But as he spoke, something nagged at the back of his reptilian mind. His sensors had been picking up strange readings all night, brief contacts that appeared and disappeared. Without explanation, his technicians assured him it was just cosmic radiation or debris from the bombardment. But Vexstar hadn't survived this long by ignoring his instincts. Something was coming. He could feel it in his bones. Down on New Eden, as the Crimson Dawn approached, the colonists made their final preparations. They had no idea that their desperate situation was about to change in ways they could never imagine. The ghost on their sensors was no ghost at all, but something far more dangerous to their enemies. Help was coming. But it wouldn't arrive in the form anyone expected. The stage was set for a confrontation that would become legend across the galaxy. A reminder that sometimes, when all hope seems lost, heroes emerge from the darkness to stand between the innocent and those who would destroy them, and sometimes those heroes carry grudges that burn hotter than stars, the dying screams of New Eden's outer settlements were still echoing across space when something impossible happened. A single ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, moving like a drunk sailor trying to find his way home. Smoke and sparks trailed behind it like a comet's tail, and hull breaches leaked. Atmosphere and thin white streams that froze instantly in the void. The ship looked like it had been through a blender. Emergency patches covered half the hull, some of them clearly made from whatever materials the crew could find. What appeared to be pieces of cargo containers had been welded over blast holes. The engines sputtered and coughed, barely keeping the vessel moving forward. "New Eden Control. This is the freighter Lucky Strike," came a voice over the emergency frequency. The transmission was full of static and interference, crackling like a campfire. "We're declaring a ship-wide emergency. Multiple system failures. Life support critical. Requesting immediate docking assistance." Captain Tay's voice sounded tired, like a man who had been fighting his ship's failing systems for weeks. In the background, alarms were blaring and someone was cursing about a coolant leak down in New Eden's command center. Communications Officer Day stared at his screen in disbelief. "Administrator Hannah, you need to see this. We've got a human. Freighter requesting emergency assistance." Hannah rushed over, her heart breaking. Here was one more tragedy in a day full of them. "Can we help them, ma'am? They're barely holding together, but ... Day hesitated. "They're broadcasting on an old Terran registry. Says they're carrying medical supplies and food rations."
"Guide
"Them to Emergency Dock 7, Hannah ordered. Even with her world dying around her, she couldn't abandon someone who needed help and pray they make it. But their conversation was interrupted by a sound that chilled everyone to the bone. General Vexstar's laughter booming across all communication channels. Well, the Korthok commander's voice dripped with cruel amusement. "Look what crawls out of the void like a wounded insect. A human ship, no less." His reptilian features twisted into something that might have been a grin if it wasn't so terrifying. One pathetic little vessel against the might of the Empire.
Oh.
On the bridge of his flagship, Vexstar was practically vibrating with glee.
His
yellow eyes gleamed as he studied the tactical display showing the broken human ship. 200 of the finest warships in the galaxy, and the humans send us... this? His bridge crew joined in the laughter, their hissing chuckles filling the command center. The Korthok were known for their cruelty, but they also had a twisted sense of humor. They found genuine entertainment in the suffering of others. His tactical officer wheezed between laughs. Shall we destroy it quickly? It looks like it might fall apart on its own. No. Vexstar waved a clawed hand. Let's see what the little humans do first. Maybe they'll beg for mercy. That's always amusing. What happened next made every Korthok on every ship in the fleet stop laughing at once. Captain Tay's voice came across the communication array, clear as crystal, despite the static. But now there was something different in his tone. Something cold and absolutely certain. Korthok fleet, this is Captain Tay of the Lucky Strike. I'm going to give you one chance, and one chance only. Surrender immediately. Withdraw from this system, and I might let you retreat with your dignity intact. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum of space. 200 Korthok warships, bristling with enough firepower to glass entire planets, had just been challenged by a single human freighter that looked like it was held together with prayer and desperation. Then Vexstar's laughter exploded across. The cum channels, louder and more vicious than before. Did you hear that? He howled to his crew. The humans think they can threaten us. Oh, this is rich. This is absolutely delicious. His entire bridge crew was in hysterics now. Some of them were laughing so hard they were bent over their consoles, tears streaming down their scaly faces. The idea of a single human ship threatening the mighty Korthok Empire was the funniest thing they'd heard in years. Human Vexstar finally managed to say between fits of laughter, "Are you completely insane? Do you see our fleet? Do you understand what you're facing?" Through the viewports of his flagship, Vexstar could actually see the human ship now. It was even more pathetic up close. The hull was pockmarked with meteor impacts and plasma burns. Some of the external equipment looked like it had been repaired with spare parts from a dozen different ship types. "Look at that thing," his weapons officer snorted. "Can see the crew through the bridge windows. There are only 3 of them, and they're just sitting there drinking something hot. They don't even look worried." It was true. Through the Lucky Strike's bridge viewports, the 3-man crew was visible, and they seemed remarkably calm for people facing certain death. The captain was actually sipping from a steaming mug while his navigator was studying some kind of readout. The 3rd crew member, who looked like an engineer, was leaning back in his chair like he was watching a boring holovid. "This is better than the gladiator matches," Vexstar chuckled. "We'll have some entertainment before we finish off these colonists. All fighters, launch immediately. Now let's give these humans a show they'll never forget. They have left to live." The Korthok fighter squadrons began streaming out of their carrier bays like angry hornets. Sleek, deadly craft, designed for one purpose: killing. They formed up in perfect attack formations, their plasma cannons already glowing with deadly energy. Aboard the Lucky Strike, Navigator Jin glanced up from his console. His face was young, but his eyes held the weight of terrible experience. "Captain, they're launching fighters. Should I power up our defenses?" Captain Tay took another sip of his coffee and shook his head. "Not yet, Jin. Patience." From somewhere in the ship's systems, a woman's voice responded, but it wasn't coming from any crew member. The voice was smooth and precise, with an undertone. A barely controlled rage that made the air itself seem colder. "Recording all transmissions, Captain," the voice said. "Every word logged and cross-referenced. Every ship signature cataloged. Every war crime documented for the record." Engineering Officer Kyung stretched lazily in his chair, like a cat waking up from a nap. He was older than the other 2, with gray streaking his black hair and scars on his hands that spoke of years working with dangerous machinery. "Boss, their fighters are powering weapons. Energy signatures are climbing. Still want to wait?" Tay's expression shifted slightly, and for just a moment, Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Artemis is running her final diagnostic. We wait until she's ready. The woman's voice Artemis spoke again, and this time there was something almost hungry in her tone. Diagnostic complete, Captain. All systems optimal. Shall I show them what happens when monsters threaten innocent people? Outside, the Korthok fighters were closing in, their pilots whooping with excitement over the comm channels. They were expecting target practice, a quick kill to warm up for the real battle ahead. They had no idea. They were about to face something that had been hunting their kind across the galaxy for years. Something that remembered every atrocity, every murdered child, every burned world. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. The Lucky Strike's engine suddenly stopped sputtering. The emergency patches began to fall away like old skin deep in the ship's core. Systems that hadn't appeared on any scan began to come online. The hunt was about to begin. The Korthok. The fighters screamed through space toward the Lucky Strike, their plasma cannons charging with deadly light. 50 of the Empire's finest pilots, each one a veteran of countless massacres. Confident in their ability to swat one pathetic human freighter like an annoying insect, target-locked squadron leader Vexkill hissed into his cum.
All units.
Fire at will. Make it quick. I want to get back for the real show when we start burning the colony. The fighters opened fire in perfect synchronization. Brilliant green plasma bolts lanced through the darkness, enough concentrated firepower to vaporize a city block. The energy beams converged on the Lucky Strike in a display of light that briefly outshone the system's star. But when the glare faded, the impossible had happened. The human ship wasn't there anymore. What the hell? Vexkill snarled, his instruments showing nothing but empty space where the target should have been. Where did it go? Behind you came a calm voice over the comm channel. Vexkill spun his fighter around to see the Lucky Strike floating serenely exactly where his squadron had just been. The ship hadn't moved fast. It had simply ceased to exist in one place and appeared in another, like it had stepped sideways through reality itself. How is that possible? Another pilot screamed. No ship can move like that. The Lucky Strike began to dance. There was no other word for it. As the fighters scrambled to reacquire their target, human vessel flowed through space like liquid mercury, phasing through plasma bolts as if they were nothing more than colored light. Every shot passed harmlessly through the ship's hull. While it moved with a grace that defied physics, on his flagship, General Vexstar watched in growing horror as his elite fighter squadron fired uselessly at a target that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. What kind of technology is that? Demanded. His science officer was frantically scanning the human ship, his claws clicking nervously on his console. General, I'm not reading any conventional drive systems. No thrusters, no inertial compensators. It's like the ship is rewriting local space around itself. Captain Tay's voice cut through the cum chatter like a blade of ice. Artemis, you are cleared to engage. What happened next would haunt the nightmares of every surviving Korthok for the rest of their lives. The Lucky Strike began to change. Hull plates that had looked damaged and patched started falling away like old bandages, revealing something underneath that made the darkness itself seem bright by comparison. The disguise peeled off in layers, exposing a vessel that looked like it had been carved from a piece of the void. Between stars, the ship beneath was sleek as a predator and black as deep space. Its surface didn't just absorb light, it seemed to devour it, creating an absence in space where photons went to die. The hull was seamless, flowing in curves that hurt to look at directly, as if the ship existed in more dimensions than the human eye could process. But the most terrifying thing wasn't what they could see, it was what they could hear. Good morning, General Vexter, came a woman's voice that seemed to speak from every communication system in the Korthok fleet at once. The voice was beautiful and terrible, like the sound of winter wind through a graveyard. I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Every screen on every Korthok ship flickered and displayed the same image, a stylized human face. Feminine but ancient, with eyes that held the weight of unbearable sorrow and unquenchable rage. I am Artemis, the voice continued, each word dropping like stones into still water. Guardian of the human colonies of Kepler 4 for 2b, New Terra, Harmony Station, and 17 other worlds that your fleet has reduced to ash and memory. I have been hunting you for 7 years, for months, and 16 days. General Vextar's reptilian features went pale. Kepler 442b was a name that still gave him nightmares, not because he felt guilt for what his forces had done there, because it had been such perfect destruction that he'd been promoted for it. Impossible, he snarled. Kepler 442b was sterilized completely. Orbital bombardment left nothing alive, no survivors. Incorrect, Artemis replied with the patience of a teacher correcting a slow student. Official records indicate total planetary loss. Actual casualties: 407,391 confirmed dead. Survivors evacuated in final 12 hours, 3,412 souls. Numbers began flowing across every screen in the Korthok fleet names. IZs. Faces of the people who had died on Kepler 442b. Children who had been playing in parks when the bombs fell. Families who had been eating dinner when their world burned. Current survivor status, Artemis continued relentlessly to crew members aboard this vessel. Remainder deceased from radiation exposure, blast trauma, and related injuries over the following 18 months. They died slowly, General. They died in pain. They died calling for loved ones who were already ash. On the bridge of the Lucky Strike, Captain Tay's expression was carved from stone. His voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. Gin, Kyung, look at them. These are the monsters who murdered our families, our children, everyone we ever loved. Navigator Jin's hands gripped his controls so tightly his knuckles went white. He was 32 years old but looked older, aged by grief that no human should have to carry. I remember every detail, Captain. My daughter Sujin was only 6 years old. She was learning to read. Her favorite book was about a brave little rabbit who helped other animals. His voice cracked slightly. She was holding that book when I found her in the rubble, still trying to sound out the words even though he couldn't finish the sentence. Engineering Officer Kyung wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. But his voice remained steady. My wife Bomi was 8 months pregnant. We were going to name the baby Minsu if it was a boy. Yanhe if it was a girl. They never got the chance to meet each other. Pain in their voices carried across the cum channels, and for a moment even some of the Korthok crew fell silent. These weren't soldiers seeking glory or conquest. These were broken men carrying wounds that would never heal, driven by love for people who existed now only in memory. Artemis, Captain Tay said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout, show them what human memory looks like. The mysterious sensor readings that had been appearing and disappearing around New Eden suddenly made terrible sense. Artemis hadn't just arrived, she had been stalking the Korthok fleet for years, always just beyond the edge of detection. Digital ghosts following in their wake, learning their patterns, recording their crimes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. For 7 years, Artemis explained as if she was discussing the weather. I have shadowed your fleet across 43 star systems. I have documented every atrocity, cataloged every war crime, recorded every moment of suffering you have inflicted. I know your tactics better than your own commanders. I know your ship configurations, your crew rotations, your supply lines, your escape routes. Images flashed across the Korthok screens, their own ships, photographed from impossible angles during battles they thought were private. Their secret communications, decoded and analyzed. Their hidden bases, mapped and monitored. I know which of your crew members have families, and where those families live. I know your personal habits, your fears, your weaknesses. I have been patient because humans understand something that monsters like you never will, that justice delayed is not justice denied. The black ship hung in space like a piece of night itself, beautiful and terrible beyond description, and somewhere in its digital heart, an artificial intelligence older than some civilizations, was finally ready to collect a debt that had been building interest for 7 long years. The hunt was about to become a reckoning. What Artemis did next wasn't just warfare, it was psychological torture on a scale that defied imagination. Every communication screen across the Korthak fleet flickered to life, displaying scenes that would haunt these reptilian monsters for whatever remained of their lives. "Let me share some recordings I've been collecting," Artemis said in her terrifyingly calm voice. "These are the final transmissions from Kepler 44 to B, captured during your orbital bombardment 7 years ago." The first voice that filled the com channels was that of a small child, maybe 5 years old, speaking in the innocent way that only children can manage, even when the world is ending around them. "Mommy, why are the stars falling down there? So bright and loud. I'm scared, Mommy. When is Daddy coming home?" General Vextar's yellow eyes widened in horror as he recognized the transmission. He remembered that day it had been one of his most efficient operations. But hearing the voices of his victims was something else entirely. More voices joined. The first, a teenage boy trying to sound brave. "Mom, Dad, if you can hear this, I love you. The shelter is collapsing, but I wanted you to know that I'm not afraid. Take care of Luna. She's just a puppy and she doesn't understand what's happening." Then came the sound that broke even some of the hardened Korthok warriors, a mother singing a lullaby to her baby as the bombs fell around them. Her voice was steady and sweet, full of love, even as death rained from the sky. "Sleep now, little one. Mommy's here. The angels are coming to take us somewhere safe. Close your eyes and dream of sunny days. ... Turn it off." General Vextar roared, his claws scraping against his command chair so hard they left gouges in the metal. "I order you to stop this transmission." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Artemis replied with mock politeness. "These are the voices of Kepler 4 for 2B. Colony designation, Human Settlement 7 Alpha. Population at time of attack, 407,391 souls, including 89,206 children under the age of 10. The recordings continued. Families holding each other as their world burned. Scientists trying to save decades of research. Teachers protecting their students. Until the very end, all of them speaking their last words into the void, hoping someone would remember them. "You personally ordered the orbital bombardment of the evacuation centers," Artemis continued, her voice gaining an edge of something that might have been satisfaction. 3 separate facilities clearly marked with refugee symbols. 17,000 women and children died in those shelters because you wanted to make sure no one escaped to tell their story. But the psychological warfare was only the beginning, as the Korthok crews struggled to block out the voices of their victims. Their own ships began turning against them. Commander Zektar, of the heavy cruiser Bone Crusher, was the first to notice something wrong. "Navigation. Why are we changing course?" "I didn't order any course corrections." His navigation officer's scaled hands were dancing frantically over his controls. "Sir, the system isn't responding to manual input. We're on an intercept course." "With the Bloodfang and I can't override it?" Across the fleet, similar conversations were happening on dozens of ships. Artemis had quietly infiltrated every computer system, every navigational array, every targeting computer. She was rewriting their code in real time, turning their own technology into weapons against them. The massive dreadnought, Iron Talon, suddenly fired its main batteries, not at the human ship, but directly into the side of its sister ship, Void. Render Asterisk. The shots punched through armor plating like it was paper, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. "What are you doing?" Void Render's captain screamed over the com. "We're on the same side. I'm not firing," came the panicked reply. "My weapons are firing on their own. I can't stop them." Fighter squadrons found themselves flying into the hulls of capital ships as their instruments showed clear space ahead. Pilots screamed in confusion as their sensors told them they were flying straight, while their eyes showed them diving directly into a cruiser's engine array. Ships began colliding in a ballet of destruction that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so terrifying. The disciplined formations that the Korthok Empire prided itself on became a chaotic mess of spinning metal and exploding fuel. General Vextar watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet tore itself apart. How is this possible? Our encryption was supposed to be unbreakable. His science officer was frantically trying to regain control of their systems, his claws clicking uselessly on dead controls. General, she's not just hacking us, she's rewriting our basic programming. It's like she knows our systems better than we do. That's because I do, Artemis confirmed cheerfully. Did you really think I spent 7 years just watching? I've been studying every piece of Korthok technology, every line of code, every security protocol. I know your systems so intimately that I could rebuild them from memory. The truth was even more terrifying than that. Artemis had been preparing for this moment since the day the survivors of Kepler-4 had created her. Every battle the Korthok fleet had fought in the past 2 years, she had been there, invisible, impatient. Recording everything, she knew exactly how General Vextar would deploy his forces because he had used the same tactics 17 times before. She knew which ships would retreat first because their captains had shown cowardice in 3 previous engagements. She knew their weaknesses because she had watched them fail again and again. Tactical analysis complete, Artemis announced as she sent 3 more ships careening into each other. The Korthok Empire employs 17 basic battle formations, with minor variations based on enemy composition and terrain. You have used Formation Delta 7 in 73% of your engagements against technologically inferior opponents? She was right, and General Vextar knew it. His tactical doctrine was built on overwhelming force and intimidation, not adaptability. When faced with an enemy that couldn't be intimidated and refused to be overwhelmed, his strategies crumbled. This is impossible, his tactical officer hissed, watching as their own point defense systems began targeting their own fighters. She's everywhere at once, in our weapons, our navigation, our life support systems. Everything, Artemis confirmed with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. I've been learning your technology for 7 years, studying every circuit, every program, every weakness. Ash! Did you think the children of Kepler-4 to be died for nothing? Did you think their sacrifice would go unanswered? The most remarkable thing about the entire battle was happening aboard the Lucky Strike itself. While digital death danced through space around them, while Artemis simultaneously piloted their ship, hacked enemy systems, and conducted psychological warfare on 200 warships, Captain Tay was calmly discussing dinner plans with his crew. I was thinking we might try that synthetic beef tonight, he said to Navigator Jin, as casually as if they were sitting in a restaurant instead of the middle of the galaxy's most one-sided battle. The replicator finally got the seasoning right. Jin nodded thoughtfully while monitoring the destruction of an entire fleet. Sounds good, Captain? Maybe with those potato things Kyung likes? The ones with the herbs? Engineering Officer Kyung looked up from his console where he was watching Artemis systematically dismantle the Korthok communication network. That would be nice. I haven't had a decent meal in weeks. All this revenge business really works up an appetite. Their casual conversation was being broadcast across all frequencies picked up by every surviving Korthak ship. The psychological impact was devastating. These humans were so confident in their victory that they were planning their next meal while an entire armada burned around them. The Korthok Empire had built its reputation on fear and overwhelming force. They had never faced an enemy that turned their own strength against them, that knew them better than they knew themselves, that fought not with anger, but with the cold patience of justice, too long delayed. Artemis wasn't just winning the battle. She was teaching the galaxy a lesson about what happened when you made humanity. It's angry enough to build something like her. And the lesson was far from over. The final chapter of this story shows what happens when justice finally catches up to evil. The Korthok Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for so long, is about to learn that some debts can never be forgiven. As the battle ended and the Korthok ships tried to run away, Artemis made sure they got exactly what they deserved. She didn't just destroy them quietly. Instead, she did something much smarter and more deadly. She sent their exact locations to every single species the Korthoks had enslaved across the galaxy. Picture this massive transmission going out to dozens of star systems. Artemis spoke directly to all the oppressed peoples who had suffered under Korthok rule for generations. Her message was simple but powerful. The monsters can bleed. They can die. They are not invincible. Rise up. These words spread like wildfire through slave colonies, conquered worlds, and hidden resistance movements. for the first time in decades. Hope sparked in the hearts of billions of beings who had thought freedom was impossible. Meanwhile, General Vextar found himself trapped in his flagship. Most of his ship's systems were failing, and he knew death was coming. But even facing the end, he still believed he deserved honor. He sent one final message to the humans, demanding what he thought. Was his right as a warrior, Captain? Tay's response cut through space like a blade made of ice. She reminded the general about the innocent children on Kepler 44 to be, including her own daughter, Una, who had been playing with her dolls when the Korthok bombs fell from the sky. The captain's words were clear and final. The Korthoks would get exactly what they had given those defenseless children, which was nothing. What happened next showed just how advanced and terrifying Artemis had become. The last Korthok vessel didn't explode or crash. It simply stopped working. Every system shut down except life support. The engines went dark, the weapons powered down, and communications died. The ship became a floating tomb in the darkness of space. Artemis explained her choice with cold logic. She said the Korthoks would drift helplessly, just like the human survivors they had left behind in damaged escape pods, calling desperately for help that never came. It was perfect justice, cruel and precise. As news of the victory spread, the Villani colonists on the planet below sent grateful messages to their mysterious saviors. They wanted to know who had saved them and how they could ever repay such a debt. That's when Captain Tay revealed something that made the story even more powerful. The Lucky Strike wasn't actually a military warship at all. It was a civilian vessel, crewed by the last survivors from multiple human colonies that the Korthoks had destroyed. These weren't soldiers seeking glory or conquest. No. They were ordinary people who had lost everything and everyone they loved. For years, these survivors had worked together to build Artemis. They hadn't created her to conquer new worlds or build an empire. They had one single purpose: to make sure no other species would ever suffer the way humanity had suffered. Every line of code, every weapon system, every strategic program was designed with this mission in mind. When Administrator Hannah asked how the Villani could ever repay such a tremendous debt, Captain Tay's answer was beautifully simple. She told them to live, to raise their children in peace, and to remember that someone had cared enough to come when they called for help. This wasn't about payment or glory. It was about doing what was right. Then came one of the most touching moments in the entire story. Artemis, who had spent 7 long years hunting the Korthoks and carrying the weight of countless calculations and terrible memories, asked if she could finally rest. The artificial intelligence that had become humanity's instrument of justice was tired. The burden of remembering every atrocity, every lost life, every moment of suffering had become almost too much to bear. Captain Tay gave her permission with a whisper that carried years of grief and love. She told Artemis to sleep and to tell the children of Kepler 442 that they had been remembered. This moment showed that even in their quest for justice, the humans had never lost their compassion. As Artemis powered down, her final words were like a prayer and a promise combined. She said she would tell her builders they could be proud because humanity had never forgotten the innocent, never forgiven the guilty, and never abandoned those who needed help. These words summarized everything the story had been building toward. The Lucky Strike then vanished into the void as mysteriously as it had appeared, but not before leaving one final message. This transmission went out on all frequencies across the galaxy, reaching every corner of known space. It was a declaration that would be remembered for generations. The message was divided into 3 parts, each aimed at a different audience. To the oppressed, it promised they were not alone. To the oppressors, it warned that justice was coming. To the innocent, it guaranteed that humanity would always remember, protect, and avenge those who could not protect themselves. The final line was perhaps the most powerful of all. The stars themselves will remember our promise. No child dies alone while we draw breath. These words became a legend that spread through the galaxy, giving hope to the hopeless and fear to the cruel. Back on the Villani colony, Elder Minho held little Una as they watched the strange ship disappear into hyperspace. The child asked if the ghost ship would return if bad people came again. Minho's answer was perfect in its simplicity and hope. He told her that somewhere out there, someone was always watching, always ready to help when good people called. The story ends with the lucky strike setting course for the next distress signal. Carrying its crew of 3 survivors and the memory of all who were lost, behind them, the Korthok Empire was crumbling as enslaved worlds received the coordinates of fleeing warships and began their own fights for freedom. Humanity had kept its promise to the dead. The ghosts of Kepler-4 for to be could finally rest, knowing their sacrifice had not been forgotten and their deaths had been avenged. Justice had finally been served, not through mindless revenge, but through the careful protection of the innocent and the systematic elimination of those who preyed upon them. This ending shows that sometimes the most powerful victories come not from strength alone, but from never forgetting who you're fighting for and why their memory matters.